So I don't know if you want to give a brief introduction, Rob and Alex, yourselves as well, just your investment experience, either raising money or writing checks and stuff.
Great. Okay, so yeah, I won't do the Seldon introduction, as most of you will have heard a good half an hour of that earlier. In terms of our experience, I've raised from VCs in the past, but I found that with Seldon, that the route I've taken is initially with angels and effectively bootstrapping through revenue and working with large organizations in order to get our first platform released. And so really it's a couple of years we've been operating under that basis, and I'm currently doing a seed round, which is on the larger end of seed rounds, and I won't comment further on when that's closing, but that's currently in progress.
Yeah. So my name's Rob. I run the Techstars Berlin city programs. We have 4 Techstars programs in Berlin. Most cities we have them. We have a city program, which is vertical agnostic. Connor runs the SAP program we have, which is focused on B2B, SaaS, AI, ML, that kind of stuff. And we have 2 metro programs, one focused on hospitality. There's Colin. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Colin. Yeah.
We're just doing intros here next in a second.
So my background is actually closely related with what she was talking about. I spent 8 years military intelligence for the United States military, and then I founded a company in London called Makers Academy, which is the largest coding boot camp outside the United States. And I've been with Techstars now for about 2.5 years. I have about a little bit over 30 companies in my portfolio. I did the math earlier today. About 17% of them are AI ML companies.
Great. Hi everybody, sorry I'm late, just a delayed flight. So I'm Colin Hanna. I'm an early stage venture investor at Balderton Capital, which is a London-based venture capital fund. We invest in typically Series A rounds all across Europe. We have 5 portfolio companies here in Berlin, a lot in the UK, and a lot spread out around France and the Nordics. We tend to view, I think, machine learning more as sort of a foundational technology that is going to power the next generation of businesses across all the different verticals. It's sort of almost going to become, I think, a hygiene metric, so to speak. Historically, we've done some interesting investments in AI. We have a generalist AI investment called the Curious AI, which is up in Scandinavia. And one of, I think, the better known ones is a company called Magic Pony, which we sort of did the seed round based out of London, and they were using machine learning to do video compression, and they got bought by Twitter last year. So we always have our ears tuned to the space. We're not one of these investors that are going crazy for it. We just think it's going to become a hygiene metric, and as long as you're really, really thoughtful and targeted about how you go about using it, that's what we look for more importantly.
Okay, and just to that point, maybe since you've already touched on that, Colin, how do you assess and evaluate machine learning startups, particularly in early stage? And you kind of indicate it's not differently from, you don't evaluate them any differently, or do you evaluate them differently? Because obviously there's more a technical component, a new market component. Is there any way you look at them differently from traditional, let's say, B2B SaaS companies?
I wouldn't see again, what I would say is we're not categorizing companies based on whether they're machine learning companies or not machine learning companies. I think it's more about what's happening now is everybody's using the label, and everybody's throwing around the label almost willy-nilly. And the fact is that there's a huge spectrum about the machine learning algorithms that are available to people, right? And my former company that I used to work at, SoundCloud, uses machine learning to do personalized recommendations on their kind of recent product feature called the Upload. And that's like pretty hairy stuff. But nobody's calling SoundCloud a machine learning company first and foremost. But they're relatively advanced about how they're employing and deploying it in their product. So I think we really think about it on a case-by-case basis and sort of say, okay, what is the problem that this company is trying to solve? Does it make sense to be using machine learning to solve that problem? If so, are they? If not, okay, then that they don't make the cut. If so, are they doing this the right way? Are they thinking about it in a targeted fashion? Are they collecting the right data set to solve that question? And so that's kind of how we think about it, rather than comparing machine learning companies versus SaaS businesses, for example.
So it's kind of like, 3 years, 5 years ago, everyone's like mobile first. Everyone's like, oh, my startup is mobile first. And then big data was probably 3, 4 years ago as well. And now machine learning does seem like the buzzword. And I think as we look at the market, I see a lot of B2B SaaS companies who are kind of maybe have some traction and they're saying, now we're going to apply machine learning. And then you see pure machine learning kind of research teams going, now we're going to find a business model. So Alex, maybe how are you finding that? Is that how you see the market? Are you seeing companies emerging like that, or what's your experience as an entrepreneur on the other side of the table, talking to people like Colin and Rob on the investment side?
I definitely agree that pretty much any organization, large and small, can use machine learning to solve problems more effectively, gain a competitive advantage, especially when they have a proprietary data set they've built, which obviously the larger organizations have a kind of unfair advantage there. But I'll quote another VC researcher. I think it's about 86%. I think it's David Kellner from MMC. It's about 86% of companies are using machine learning to solve a problem, and then the rest are building more foundational technologies which other organizations can use to solve machine learning more effectively. That's where we sit within Seldon as a machine learning deployment platform, which if you look at the journey that someone will go on in integrating machine learning within their organization, there's a whole series of different startups that can solve each of those different problems. Everything from data wrangling, data prep, model training. Obviously, there's a lot of model building frameworks, but those are becoming increasingly commoditized and baked. Things like TensorFlow, where we sit is around deployment, as I sort of spoke at length earlier, and that's something which is a really key problem that organizations are starting to face as they move out of their kind of R&D labs into productionizing in the real world. One of the other sort of challenges then that you face is when you're tackling a certain very focused industry problem, it's much easier to be very verticalized and focused. But when you're creating more of a platform business, it makes sense in the longer term, at least, to be more horizontal. So kind of one of the ways that we're looking at it, even though our heart is really in the kind of broad horizontal platform, we've really narrowed our focus over the last year from a commercial perspective anyway on banking and financial services, and just tried to go deep on picking up a few clients in that space. Now working with Barclays through the Techstars program that we were on, picked up another banking client earlier this year, doing some currency market work, and we though have this kind of 80-20 rule. So about 80% of our product development is actually generalized, and about 20% is kind of focused on the industry that we're going after. But then we flip it on the commercial side and just go out, do our more outbound, focused on the target sector. But then we're opportunistic about picking up revenue from other sources. So yeah, we've been funding ourselves to date over the last year or so, as I said, through angel round and through revenue. I think it's really important to know when to start scaling and when to start taking VC funding as well. As it may not necessarily be on day one if you can.
But I think it makes sense. A lot of the teams are looking for business models. The best way to do that often is to do services revenue at the start. As an R&D, until you find that vertical that works for you or works for your team.
It's worked very well for us.
But it's not as sexy to the VCs.
It's not. You have to kind of try sort of tactfully kind of package it in a way that is more digestible, because I think the playbook, I suppose, for a lot of investors is to try to, as quickly as early as possible in investment discussions, categorize a startup as a services startup or a very scalable kind of SaaS business. But in that very early stage, especially in deep tech, where you're trying to solve problems in an enterprise, that is a really great way of kind of getting close to the client and sort of closing that feedback loop, which ultimately enables you to, have large organizations pay for your customer development process, which otherwise you'd be kind of, asking for it as a favor. And in this case, they're effectively paying for it. But it also helps then, us to prioritize our product roadmap. As clients, so what we're seeing is as clients get more and more advanced, they, we can actually then sort of bump them to a more sort of self-maintaining model where where they're building their own models in-house.
Yeah, you're making money while you sleep instead of doing the services model.
Exactly.
Just that then, Rob. So like you mentioned your companies, your portfolio, you've made 30 investments in Berlin. Were they machine learning companies first that came in, or were they talking about, how did they pitch you? Were they talking about your problems they were solving, to Colin's point, and how they're going to apply machine learning to solve that? Or were they solving problems and then they applied machine learning to solve existing problems they were tackling?
I mean, I can kind of hop on board with what Colin said. I don't differentiate between AI and non-AI companies when I'm doing the selection process. I would say out of the 5 that I've invested in, one of them, it really boils down to, it doesn't matter if it's AI, ML, or any other technology. You don't want to invest in a solution in search of a problem, really. So this idea of finding great AI engineers and then trying to build a company around them, I think is a lot less interesting than a company that's presenting a real business case and a tweak with artificial intelligence or machine learning that's added to it. I think one of the things we start seeing a lot of is, as investors, and I'm one of these investors myself, is like, I can't dive super deep on the technical analysis of what AI, what's possible, what's not possible, where it's at, how this competes with other stuff. So we often have to rely on other experts to look at that stuff. But what I would caution is a lot of companies just try to pitch themselves as an AI company as if the AI ML aspect is some sort of magic potion that's going to help them beat everybody else in the market. So for me, I much prefer to invest in companies that are solving a real business case, and AI ML is more of fuel than a necessary component of their success.
Okay. I want to open up the questions in a second, but so get ready if you have any questions you want to ask these guys here. But the last one I kind of have a fear about is with regard to machine learning, and my background is more computer science and built a data science company, but aren't as familiar, again, as Rob said, with the intricacies of machine learning, the latest technologies. But one of the trends that's coming out an awful lot is the requirement for data and processing power. So typically a startup will maybe have some of the team who have the insights, the problems they want to solve, but actually it's the corporates, I think, more and more now have these data sets. So I'm actually kind of a very optimistic person, but I also have a slight concern around, is there possibilities from, like, startups have to pair up with corporates earlier and earlier. And we do that at Techstars. We're actually very comfortable with that, but equally, as a startup founder myself, I'm concerned about that, to get access to those data sets. So I don't know, are you seeing that? Because that requires obviously not just machine learning skills, but the ability to sell and convince big companies like Ford, like Barclays, to share data with you or share customer data with you guys.
So that is a clear challenge, and it's one that you're totally right that by engaging with a large organization will give you early access to data, and that can be a significant barrier to entry. I'm going to give a couple of examples with Barclays. The first project, one of many hopefully, is with Barclaycard, where basically we're helping to predict credit default, so identifying which customer accounts are likely to go into arrears to help reduce bad debt. And then Barclays see it as a way of improving the customer experience, so they reach out before you miss a payment. So to actually do that,
to get access to that data, obviously.
To offer that product kind of fully baked, right? It would involve having access to the credit card data from real life transactions. So what we've done is basically work through on a project basis and gain access to very proprietary large data set that we can use to build a model. Another example is with another bank where basically we're helping to predict currency markets. So looking at whether the currency market is going to go up or down at the next PIP. A PIP has 4 decimal places resolution, and significant amount of value to be created by increasing the accuracy by even just just a few pips.
Unless it's
so-
blockchain technologies, which just go up 100% a day. So
Yeah, exactly.
you wouldn't notice a pip.
In that case, we'll get access to a limit order book, which hedge funds.
But those
spend
skill sets weren't
fortune.
machine learning skill sets. They were probably legal, procurement. You had to go through the whole process.
Yeah, exactly. So that
data privacy, everything around that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's one of the things we learned a lot through being part of the Barclays Techstars program, is really how to properly engage a large bank and go through the necessary control, compliance processes, and eventually now have Seldon in a position where we're on the approved sort of software list. And that, although that's a massive barrier to get through, getting through that barrier it presents us an opportunity which we can then engage further with the same bank or other banks, and also it's a barrier to other competitors. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions at this stage? Yeah.
So I have a question. Let's say big computing, cloud computing has been commoditized already 2-3 years ago. Okay, any single company out there can, within 1 week, access tons of cloud computing, mostly for free. And if you're a big company, again, it takes 1 week to implement it. When do you think AI will be commoditized? When do you think certain specific algorithm will be commoditized? When will you say that a startup starts doing their job, and the first thing they say, okay, we're going to access this component AI, and this component is just a plug and play to do whatever they want to do next?
First thing I'll say is it already exists to some degree with TensorFlow, right? And you see there's a TensorFlow API. I think 2 weeks ago, Google released a version of TensorFlow that can be actually on device, right? So it's actually happening locally on something as small as a smartphone with a CPU processor there. So certain, I think, not relatively low level, or like certain generic algorithms, you are going to have it become completely commoditized. Cloud servers are going to provide it. I think that there are a couple interesting sort of tweaks going forward, right? I mean, I think the first thing, and this touches on Connor's point too, is I don't believe that, I think that actually solving the really, really hard problems with machine learning is really, really dependent on having a very, very specific and relevant data set. And I think actually these corporates that have these huge data sets, or these generic machine learning libraries that have these data sets, they're not necessarily going to be very, very helpful moving the needle to get from whatever it is, 95% accuracy to the 99 or 99.9 that you need to really, really solve the problem in an efficient manner, right? So, this is what you see a company here in Berlin that's doing sort of deep learning on video, that, you have a huge video library on YouTube that's completely free and open source, but they're actually going through the painstaking process of recording videos in their own studio, tagging them, labeling them, because that's the way that their algorithm learns, right? So, and from the way they tell it, there's no shortcut to doing that. I mean, even if you had all the hand gestures, because they're focused on hand gestures videos from YouTube, you'd have to go through and tag them. So if you're going to go through the work of tagging them, you might as well take the 20 seconds it takes to record them in the first place, right? To tag the actual data that you think is going to be relevant to move the needle on the algorithm. So all that to say that depending on the use case, I don't think you're going to have a situation where it's all going to become completely 100% commoditized, that everybody's going to be there. The only other one thought I'll throw out to you is, IBM Q has released sort of quantum computing via the cloud that is going to be able to, quantum computing in particular can be really, really good for integer factorization, but also sort of database search, right? And, that's going to lead the compute power to veer towards these cloud services. But I think that the data sets that you use in order to actually, for the algorithms, the data sets that you apply the algorithms to will always need to be somewhat proprietary in a way. That's my thinking.
And just to follow up on that question, because that's a great example here in Berlin, would you invest in a company whose pitch is, we need 5 million to build our own proprietary data set? Or are you looking for a company that says, hey, we're working with Barclays and we have access to proprietary data set? They're like, would sort of need to have access to that data set, or is it a viable interest for you, Rob, or for you, Colin, from an investment perspective, if my pitch is to build a proprietary data set? Because I'd agree with that comment. I think the data is going to come back to being the unique factor. That's going to be more the power of who's got the data, because to train those models, you need to have that data, that rich data set, or tagged data set, or curated data set.
If Barclays has the data, it's not really proprietary, is it?
Proprietary to Barclays.
But the company is going to be working with Barclays.
Yeah.
And then it's, you know.
Well, they'll own the model off that data, and that's kind of...
Yeah, I mean, we'd probably prefer the one that's going to go and build the proprietary data set, but even then, that's difficult to invest $5 million in a company that's going to build a data set because, you know, that's
like a hardware company who's going to build 1,000 devices. You don't want to do that either because it's going to get capital cost before you can get the business value. Yeah. Sorry.
I don't really have anything to add. I mean, yeah, what's better to build your own data set or to attach to an existing data set? That would be one probably fairly small variable when looking at the company holistically. I mean, when I look at AI companies, it's usually the engineering team that's the most important. Like, what kind of AI background do they have? What kind of ML background do they have? Like, have they worked on stuff like this before? So the idea of the data set being important, yes, but which one gets there the fastest, I honestly have no idea.
Yep. Any other questions? Yep.
So, final question, as always. Can machine outperform humans? So you two already answered in the interview, but maybe you can also share with audience here, and you two can tell us right now. So recently there is a research that around 50 to 150 we are all jobless, and they can all do better than us. And Jack Ma said that they're supposed to do things better than us, so things we can do. And Sam Altman say it's gonna be a big change, so we have to know how to deal with. And Elon Musk say we need a universal income because Rob can replace us. So how do you think about it?
Solve the future, Colin, in 3 words. Yeah.
So the question is, do I think machines will be able to outperform humans?
I worry, what do you think we should do, and just some opinion around it?
I mean, from a high level, I have my personal opinion, and then I have my investment opinion, which I'm responsible to my LPs for, I guess. My investment opinion means AI is one very, very small part of a holistic view of whether or not I make an investment. My personal opinion, I mean, I think the next 40 years are going to be pretty interesting. I mean, either things can go really, really well, or things can go really, really poorly. I think there's a lot of evidence that we should be looking closely at things like, basic universal income, things like that. Yeah, I guess that's essentially it.
So it's clear that machine learning is already outperforming humans in very narrow domains, and almost every day you will hear of a new task that machines are outperforming humans on, and it really is going to have an incredible impact on society over the next few years. I think it is very real that there will be a massive amount of displacement in terms of the jobs that people are doing today will not look the same in even 10, 20 years time. But the same would look. You'd say the same if you were to wind back 20 years from today, or if you want to wind back 40 years from today. If they looked at people all tapping away on smartphones and laptops, communicating with each other in nanoseconds over the internet, then and forming networks and in the way we do now, it's very fundamentally changing the way in which we work and the way in which we live. I don't see it as a sort of existential threat in any sense. I think it will augment and improve our lives in many ways on a sort of, like personal basis, and also obviously lead to massive amounts of value creation and efficiencies within business. But there is certainly a risk of there being like a much larger divide between the kind of haves and have-nots in this new economy, and that's why things like universal basic income make a lot of sense.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think it's a very very complex one, and I don't have an answer. I don't have a crystal ball. I think for me it leads to more questions than it answers by itself. I mean, for me, I often think about my fiance is in the creative industry, and I think about that what she's doing is going to be more defensible in the long run, because where does a machine find true inspiration, right? And I think anybody in the creative space understands the value of being inspired by something, the germ of that creativity. Where does that come from? How do we encode that into a machine? Can we encode that in a machine? Will we be able to tell that it's made by a machine? I think that's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of people going way too far. If you look at the data over the last 20 years, like from mid-90s, early 1990s, actually the biggest story has been a huge unlocking of the labor supply coming from the developing world in the global economy. So you have people who are willing to do higher level tasks at lower level wages, right? And that's, we're still on the early-ish side of that arc. And if you think about, now there's about 2.5 billion smartphones in the world. When everybody comes online, you're unlocking people who can go and, on people per hour, and you hire somebody from rural India who has excellent Excel skills and English skills, and they can perform the task much faster than I can or you can, or a complex task much faster than a machine can still today, because we have certain requirements for the task, etc. And that's still, happening, right? So we're talking about sort of wealth distribution happening away from individual borders across the world. And then that sort of leads the question of, well, what's the distinction between humans and machines when, on average, the average American is now spending 5 hours a day on their smartphone? And, our behavior is being channeled through this device, and that device is augmenting our behavior and our speech and our communication and our thinking. And, this line is actually going to become blurrier. So I don't have any answers there, but just some things that I think about related to the topic that I think are food for thought.
That's what we try to do. There's no answer for that, but we try to bring attention so people discuss and debate and all that stuff. That's what we want to do here today for our goal. And you want to close it?
Closed. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So thanks everybody for staying until the last talk. It was really, really appreciated. And I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed being here. I hope you enjoyed the organization. I just want Irene to come on stage. And so Irene has been the main organizer of MIE Summit. And I'm really, really proud of what you've done. And big round of applause.
I don't like to talk too long, so we're trying to do something different here. So we've been to a lot of conferences before, and we know some talks are too long, are too boring in conference room, everybody's sleepy, so we try to be open air, so everybody enjoys sound and happiness, and also we try to cut every talk to 20 or not more than 30 minutes, because that's normal human beings' attention time, only 20 minutes. So I work a lot for this summit, so I have a couple of ideas how it leads afterwards. And thank you for coming today. Thank you for Lily, that my partner is being super supportive, and when I felt really down, and he was always there. And also, thank you for coming. Thank you for paying the tickets and everything. It's very important for us. We start complete bootstrap, and we're gonna probably bootstrap for afterward as well. We probably will do a crowdfunding campaign, so I would like to all of your support, and also get some more sponsors here, that we can fly very interesting speakers over, because we also talk to like Uber, like head of machine learning, or all those big famous American speakers, but very hard to fly them over. It's so far, and it requires some money. So we hope to have more sponsors on this. And that's it for today. Please tell me if you feel not comfortable enough, or you feel any suggestion whatsoever. Just come to talk to us. I don't look the most friendly face, I know, but don't worry, come to talk to me. And enjoy the rest of the day. We have you can just open here, drinks, party, and whatever. We hope to see you very, very soon.